economies and the European welfare state. On top of that, an increasingly fragmented and decelerating global economy not only makes it harder for European businesses to export abroad, but also introduces new geopolitical risks to European supply chains. And decarbonizing the continent while simultaneously carving out market share in high tech industries of the future will require unprecedented amounts of investment. Now, to remedy all of these problems, Draghi proposes three transformations. The first is about improving European productivity by, quote, accelerating innovation and finding new growth engines. Here, Draghi describes Europe's industrial stagnation, pointing out that the European economy is still focused on mature technologies like cars, and that European business have failed to invest in newer technology like software or AI. The comparison with the US here is glaring. In the past 50 years, Europe has created zero new companies with a market capitalization over 100 billion euros, while the US has created tens of companies above this threshold, as well as six with a valuation over a trillion euros, all in tech. Draghi blames this innovation deficit on EU red tape and insufficient market integration, and calls for a streamlining of regulation to remedy it, as well as a new upskilling agenda to help European workers adapt to new technologies. The second transformation is a joint plan for decarbonisation. Here, Draghi points out that high energy prices in Europe, which are 2 to 3 times that of the US, represent a structural disadvantage to European industry, and that the long term solution is to invest in renewable energy to bring prices down in the long term. Draghi admits that this will require massive amounts of investment, and argues that the only feasible way of achieving these investments is more joint borrowing, i.e., borrowing done at the EU rather than national level. Now, we'll talk more about this in a minute, but this is a recurring theme throughout Draghi's report. He argues that in many places, joint borrowing and deeper integration across the EU is the only way to generate the fiscal firepower to stimulate Europe's stagnant economy. The third transformation, though, is all about increasing security and reducing dependencies. In other words, moving supply chains out of strategically risky places like China. Now, at first glance, this might sound a bit counterintuitive. After all, de-risking, as it's often known, is pretty expensive, and it's not clear that Europe's crumbling economy can afford these new supply chain frictions. However, Draghi argues that diversified supply chains should reduce economic uncertainty, which will, in turn, facilitate greater investment, and therefore end up being a net positive for the European economy. Again, Draghi argues that an effective de-risking strategy will require better intra-European cooperation, and his report calls for a genuine EU foreign economic policy to replace the patchwork of national industrial strategies currently emerging in Europe. All in all, the overarching theme of Draghi's report is that Europe needs deeper integration on both fiscal and strategic issues to restart its stagnant economy and survive the coming decades. Decarbonising the European economy, renovating its militaries, protecting the welfare state, modernising European industry, and returning productivity to its pre 2008 trend, all at the same time, will require literally hundreds of billions of euros in investment each and every year. In fact, Draghi's report puts the number at about 800 billion euros, or about 5% of the entirety of the EU's GDP, which would imply an increase in the EU's overall investment level from 22% of GDP to 27%. Draghi himself admits that this will be historically unprecedented. For comparison, investment under the Marshall Plan, the US-led plan to restore the European economy after World War II, came to about 2% of GDP. And no European states have the fiscal space to borrow this amount of money afresh. France and Germany, for instance, are both currently engaging in another round of austerity, and the European economy is simply too weak to fund this investment via massive tax hikes or spending cuts elsewhere. This is why Draghi recommends that Europe facilitate at least some of this investment via new debt instruments at the EU level. To avoid double spending and maximize efficiency, Draghi also recommends closer European cooperation across a whole range of sectors, including defense procurement, foreign policy, and industrial policy. While expanding the EU's policy remit might sound like the sort of thing that would increase bureaucracy, after all, it would mean more bureaucrats in Brussels, Draghi tacitly argues that greater European cooperation will actually reduce frictions by standardizing across the continent. In the aggregate, this is a Macron-esque call for a more federal Europe, but justified in economic terms as the only way to save Europe's flailing economy. With issues like these, it's often hard to come to the right conclusions. So if you want to improve your decision making, you'll want to check out Brilliant. Brilliant is where you learn by doing.
Okay, hi everyone, and let me stop to share here and go back to the class. And I haven't used this Zoom for several months since the spring of last year. So I opened it up and I see it's got some new components and formats. So it's the first time I've seen this upgrade since I used this in the springtime of this year. So hopefully I'll get back into the full format. So we are recording, and I will post the link to the recording on Cyber Campus so anybody can go watch it. And of course, one of the nice aspects of recording and uploading is that you can then turn on YouTube's captions and get it automatically translated into French or Korean or whatever language. And I always thought that was a nice plus of Zoom when we were doing Zoom during the pandemic. But I guess the students didn't like it very much because they prefer the in-class format, which is great. But of course, we have a lot of holidays. We have this goes through Wednesday, and then of course we have other holidays, and so I think we're always going to have a role for these online formats. So thank you for showing up, and let me then also, so I don't forget, go to the Cyber Campus, and I always have to remember to do the screen share. So we do the share, and there we have here. So share, and there you see the Cyber Campus, and so we go to the attendance for the class, and the Cyber Campus number is 121. 121 is your Cyber Campus sign-in number, 121. And so what I've also learned, of course, as I recall, is to go to the chat function, of course, and so and I put in here 121 is the guy. Yes, it always asks me some silly thing here. So okay, 121 is your sign-in number. So there you go, and so you also got the notification, I think, through Cyber Campus that I posted the midterm take-home paper assignment. So let's talk about that. And so we go back to the so I always have to remember to do the share. And so we go to share again, and then we go back to the assignments here, and you can see the midterm take-home paper has been posted. And of course, it's a question from chapter 5 of the book, which is how to explain the fact that the Council, meaning the Council of the European Union, which is the meeting of the ministers of the member states of the European Union, in their different formations, right? So the General Affairs Council is the meeting of the foreign ministers. So when the foreign minister of Germany and France and Italy and Greece and Bulgaria and Lithuania and all 27 member states get together, that's called the Foreign Affairs Council. Then, of course, the Council of the European Union also has other formations, including, for example, the formation of when the agricultural ministers of the member states get together, or the interior ministers get together that deal with policing and justice issues, or the defense ministers. Whenever these ministers from each of the member states get together, it's called a meeting of the Council of the European Union. That's its official title. The European Council, the European Council meets, that's when the prime ministers and presidents get together, the most powerful executive branch authorities. In Germany, that would be the German prime minister, or the German term, of course, is the Kanzler. So people still talk about the translation of Kanzler in English is Chancellor. So Olaf Scholz is the Chancellor of Germany, which is the Prime Minister of Germany. The British are no longer in the European Union, of course, but the President of France would be in the European Council meeting, because the President of France is the most powerful executive branch official in France. And in Poland, it's probably the prime minister, although the Poles fight about who's more important in foreign policy, the president or the prime minister, depending on the party that's in power. And so so when it says the council, it means all of those different groups, the meeting of the agricultural ministers, the foreign ministers. even the European Council, when they rarely formally take a vote on proposed policy measures. How to explain that fact that even though the European Union has what it calls the ordinary legislative procedure, the OLP, right? The ordinary legislative procedure is the procedure whereby, to make legislation for the European Union, to make laws for the European Union single market and other areas besides the single market, the Commission, the European Commission, has the formal sole power to propose legislation, right? So the European Commission proposes a piece of legislation, a law, a new law, and then the European Parliament has to vote by majority vote whether to approve and amend it and approve it, and also the Council of the European Union has to vote by qualified majority vote to amend and approve the legislation. So formally, and remember, 80% of the European Union legislation deals with the single market, right? The single market, creating the European single market. That's still overwhelmingly the dominant focus of lawmaking in the European Union. And so typically, in making those laws of the single market, you don't need all 27 member states. They don't have to all agree. You can approve it by majority vote in the Council, as well as, of course, the European Parliament. And that qualified majority vote, I think, is now, it's called qualified majority because it means that when they vote, if they do vote, the vote has to represent, in favor of the legislation, the vote of the countries of the 27 member state ministers, and when you add them up, they have to represent 57% of the population, at least 55% of the population of the European Union, so 55% of 450 million, and they have to represent a majority of the member states, so at least 14 of the member states. So you add those two together, and that's all you need to pass legislation through the Council. You don't have to get all 27 member states to agree. But the question highlights the fact that how to explain the fact that the Council rarely takes a formal vote. Typically, that means that they don't really want to ram something down against the will of the minority. They want to get the minority on side. They would rather not have to formally vote. Okay, we can't agree. Let's just take a vote. And if we get a majority, sorry, you guys in the minority, you lose. They don't like to do that. The European Union, the Council of the European Union doesn't like to do that. That's the point of this. Why are they so concerned about not having to embarrass somebody by making them lose? And writing it down. We had a formal vote, and these countries voted against the proposal, but they were in a minority and they lost. They don't like to do that. The European Union, and particularly the Council of the European Union, doesn't like to do that. How to explain that? And of course, my go-to explanation is always nationalism, right? Nationalism, nationalism, nationalism. And when they do vote, it's a big deal. It's typically a big deal, because if they have to vote, that means they are unable to persuade somebody, no matter how much they try, to get them to agree, the minority to agree, to acquiesce, to accept compromises, that they think that they have to take a formal vote, and somebody's going to lose. It's going to be known and recorded in the records that country or countries lost. And it's going to be reported in the media. It's going to be reported in the newspapers. It's going to be reported in the television news, and somebody's going to get upset that Greece or Bulgaria and Lithuania, that they were forced to adopt this even though they didn't want it. And so they do that at times, but it's rare, and which tells you they go out of their way not to have that happen. They try to provide incentives, benefits, payoffs, promises in the future that if you acquiesce to this policy, France or Germany, you don't like it, next time on this other issue, we'll take your preferences as number one. So there's all this what we call log rolling and horse trading, right? Because they would rather not make a country accept something that they don't want, that they don't accept. So that's the assignment. And it says that the paper should be, 450 to 550 words, again, no more than 10% of the midterm essay should consist of quoted text, like your paragraphs. you should send to me as an MS Word file so that I can write comments on it, because when you upload this first draft, I'm going to download it, and then I'm going to write comments on it in the TRK function and send it back to you. And make in terms of my suggestions or responses or thoughts, critiques, and then you're going to rewrite it and submit it to me by the end of next month, Saturday, and I'm going to put a grade on it. In between then, you're going to rewrite the paper after you get my comments on the first draft that you're going to submit on October 5, by October 5, and then I'm going to write comments on it, send it back to you, and then also you're going to meet with me. So during the midterm week, we'll schedule meetings on Monday, Wednesdays, and Friday for you to meet with me in my office, or if you prefer on Zoom like now, and to talk about my comments for half an hour. And, so that one of the reasons for that is because, of course, it gives me an opportunity to get to know you a little bit better, to explain my comments, to give you some more practice in using your English by, engaging in a discussion with me, because you've written your paragraph, you've written your essay. So you've been thinking about the topic. So we'll talk about the topic, and just to get to know each other a little bit better, because, that's kind of important. I think, that particularly, at a university where you have smaller classes, that you get some one-on-one time in talking with the professor. So, and so that's the plan. And so, and again, the writer, you should use and cite specific information from at least 3 different chapters, from chapters 1 through 5 of the course textbook. So you know how I always ask you to use and cite specific information from the week's readings for your paragraphs? Well, this is the same here, except I want you to have use and cite information from at least 3 different chapters. And of course, I've been uploading the notes for each of the chapters on the cyber campus, and so that should help you locate that information. And you can do additional research if you'd like. That's fine. It's up to you. And so that's the plan. And if you have any questions, you can always ask questions. You can ask questions now. You can on Zoom. You can raise your hand. You do the Zoom raise hand function, or you can just raise your voice. So, and of course, so you can do that in class as well when we meet on Friday. Okay, so yeah, just to remind you that that is there. Also, I guess maybe we can just see what happens. Has anybody signed up for the debate? So we go here to my Google account here. So I got to remember again to stop share, and I go to share screen again. And let's see, I go here, share, and you go here. And so I go to my drive, and we click here on my drive, and we look here at and so has anybody signed up? So nobody signed up for this week. So again, nobody signed up for any debates. So I assume you're thinking about that, right? You're going to sign up. So you're going to sign up for a debate, right? Since we're already in week 4. So, all right. So, just to make sure you all see that, this is where you're going to sign up. And then, when I also post a sign up sheet for your conference sessions to come meet with me during week 8. I'll post a file like this, and you'll sign up for time slots to come meet with me and talk about your first paper, your first drafts of your midterm paper. Okay. Okay. Any questions? All right, so let me go back here, and then let me open up another file here, and again, keep you excited about what's going on here. Yeah, everybody's talking about this Draghi report, right? So here is the chapter on institutions. So let me open up those notes here, and again, I have to go back to Zoom and go to share screen and show you the notes here. So here is the notes. The institutions are obviously really important part of the European Union. The European Commission, we've been talking a lot about the European Commission because Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, is now putting together her European Commission and trying to get gender balance. And so we've been talking about the European Commission, right? Again, since I already mentioned nationalism and pride and public opinion and elected politicians in Lithuania, Bulgaria, France, Germany, understanding the predicament of their brothers and sisters, elected politicians in their neighboring European Union member states, they know about nationalism and pride and public opinion. Because if you can't understand public opinion and voting in elections unless you understand nationalism. So countries, elected politicians don't like to embarrass other elected politicians in the European Union because they know that if they do, they're going to generate a hostile response in the other country against and they risk generating against the European Union. Now, of course, they might do that because it's useful also because you can get people to vote for you. I mean, I'm just saying that if you're an elected politician, you know all about public opinion. You're very familiar with public opinion, and you can't understand public opinion unless you understand nationalism. And people's, your typical Polish citizen is very sensitive to his understanding or her understanding of how Poland is treated in the European Union and the world. And so sometimes if you're a Polish professional politician, you can try to exploit the European Union for that purpose. Like you can say that the European Union is trying to force non-traditional values on Poland by requiring that abortion be legal, even if the European Union is very sensitive about not being in a position where it's trying to force countries to make abortion legal. But this focus in the European Union is all about human rights, including gender equality, right? Gender parity. It's really easy if you're going to focus upon gender equality and gender parity to make an argument that, well, then maybe women should be able to control their bodies, at least until the point that a fetus, a fertilized egg becomes a viable outside of the womb. In other words, if you're going to talk about gender equality, people might get suspicious that if you're going to talk about gender equality, you're going to insist that somehow women have the right to access to abortion, at least for, the first 15 weeks of a pregnancy. But so this is a very explosive issue. And so if you're a conservative politician in Poland who tries to win votes, focusing particularly in terms of your formula for election victory by focusing on conservative voters, you might be tempted to tell your voters about how much you're fighting against those Brussels bureaucrats that are trying to undermine those traditional Catholic values that we fought so much to protect against the communists, because the communists also, when the communists were in power in Bulgaria and Poland, they tried to undermine the authority of the Catholic Church in Poland and the Orthodox Church in Bulgaria. They try to undermine their authority among the population. They try to undermine respect for the Catholic Church in Poland and the Bulgarian Orthodox Church in Bulgaria. And so when the Catholic Church or the Christian churches say, that people shouldn't be, having sex before marriage. I mean, I know, in Bulgaria, the Communist Party, mocked the church and mocked its teachings and derided whatever they had to say. So, they were very much advocating undermining these traditional notions that, I heard, that, like, for example, in Eastern Europe under communism, in Russia, Soviet Union, and in Eastern Europe, the most common form of birth control, of contraception, dealing with birth was abortion. That I remember hearing 30 years ago that the typical East European woman had 5 abortions. 5. This is before, they brought in modern technology from the West with the collapse of communism, right? 5 abortions. So it was quite, and of course, women were encouraged to work, to get jobs. And that was a real positive aspect for a lot of people about communism, that they really promoted this notion of socialist equality. So women were supposed to work. They were encouraged to work. And when communism fell in Bulgaria and communism fell in Poland, all of that gender equality notion was by some competitive political entrepreneurs, professional politicians, they were promoting this notion that these were old socialist values to try to undermine the family and traditional values. So you women who like to have jobs, you shouldn't be taking jobs from men. You should go back home and take care of the children and open up those job opportunities for men, because the economy was really bad when communism collapsed in the immediate aftermath of the collapse of communism. And I remember, I went to some event in when I was in Bulgaria, and there was some event at in the city of the university where I was working at, the American University in Bulgaria, and the women were talking about professional life and I got this sense listening to these Bulgarian women talk that they felt defensive. They were on defense because they were being challenged by others in Bulgaria saying, those old notions that women should have a job and they should be able to work and they don't have to, be primarily responsible for taking care of the family, that's communism, and communism is bad. And you're a communist because you're still trying to keep that benefit you got from communism. And so it was a very difficult time. So the point is that this notion, the European Union has to deal with nationalism and the way politicians exploit nationalism for their own political purposes, right? To win elections and win power. And so this notion that the European Commission is a vehicle, particularly a target of trying to promote European policies that somehow threaten traditional Polish or Bulgarian or Greek values, pick your country, is an important, sensitive topic. So, and of course, I think I mentioned, of course, that the European Commission has the president and representatives from each of the member states, right? So that's 27 members of the European Commission because there's 27 countries in the European Union. That's considered too many. And so the Treaty of Lisbon, which was adopted and came into effect in 2009, originally was, when it was first formulated, the Treaty of Lisbon was projecting that the European Commission would be reduced down to 18 members. 18 members of the European Commission, and throw out the expectation, or get rid of the old expectation that each member state had one member of the European Commission. And Ireland at the time, they have in their constitution, they had at that time an understanding that whenever a new treaty was adopted in the European to reform and change the European Union, and that was the Treaty of Lisbon, that the Irish people had to vote in a referendum. All of the Irish voters had to vote up or down on whether or not to approve the new treaty. And so Ireland rejected the first Lisbon Treaty draft. And to get the Irish voters to vote yes, the European Commission just dismissed the European Union member states got rid of that projection. They didn't get rid of it. It's still in the treaty, but they promised that they would not implement it. And so what am I telling you? That's an example of Irish nationalism. Ireland is a small country. There's only 5 million people that live there. And these small countries next door to France, and at the time, Britain and Germany and Italy, these bigger countries, they're always kind of nervous and suspicious that they might be swallowed up and overwhelmed by the big, powerful countries in the European Union. So to get the Irish to agree to finally vote to approve the Lisbon Treaty, they have continued to have one commissioner from each of the member states, from tiny Malta and small Cyprus to big Germany. They each get one, even though they don't need 27 commissioners. There's too many. So they change the structure of the commission. They come up with jobs for commissioners to give them all a job. But they don't need 27 commissioners. But they have to have them. Why? Nationalism. The nationalism of the small countries always being kind of suspicious that they're going to be overwhelmed by agreements and promises among the big, powerful countries at their expense, at the expense of the small countries, right? So anyway, just to show you about how this European process works. So anyway, so this notion, okay, so that is one of the most, so the Commission is one of the most important, unique, and controversial European Union institutions. Uh, um, um, and so they decided to give this the responsibility to be like the brain of the European Union is the European Commission. It's the brain of the European Union, if you want to use a body analogy. And how do they give it a job, right? Like I told you, the European Commission, according to the founding treaties of the European Union, the European Commission is the body that has the right to propose legislation for the European Union to adopt. Of course, the European Commission takes feedback from the member states and all the other institutions to come up with a proposal, right? But they give this body the responsibility to come up with proposed laws, and then the Council of the European Union and the Parliament then amend and debate and approve or reject those proposals. And of course, it makes it easier for them. It makes it easier for the member states, the nations, the peoples of Europe to get things done, to get legislation approved, because they've given it to this body that is called the European Commission to do the work. And the commissioners, when they join the European Commission, they swear an oath to be the guardians of the treaties of the European Union. And that's supposed to be their primary number one duty, is to the treaties of the European Union. They're not supposed to be there representing Ireland and Bulgaria and France and Italy and Malta and Estonia and Romania. They're not supposed to do that. They're supposed to give their primary loyalty to the European Union, right? And even though, of course, they are senior, successful politicians from their home countries. So they're supposed to be politically smart, politically wise. If you are nominated by the government of Portugal to be on the European Commission from Portugal, you, as the Portuguese nominee to the European Commission, you're supposed to know about Portugal and Portuguese politics, right? And you're supposed to use that knowledge when you get together on the European Commission and write new laws for the European Union. What will the Portuguese be able to accept? At the same time, you're not supposed to be there representing Portugal officially. So, okay, so that's an important point, right? The Commission is supposed to make it easier. It's supposed to help the member states. Remember liberal intergovernmentalism, right? The purpose of all these institutions is to make it easier for the member states of the European Union to agree on things, including the policies necessary to create a genuine single market and economic and monetary union. And then, of course, when the European Union adopts policies first proposed officially by the European Commission, then the European Commission is supposed to monitor the implementation of those policies by the member states. So the Commission and its bureaucracy is supposed to see and look at what the member states are actually doing once the European Union adopts policies. Of course, keep this in mind. You hear these, we talk about these because, this is professional politicians. They're always thinking about the next election. Everything they do is thinking about public opinion in the next elections. And so the European Commission can often be a target. So if I want to win elections in Poland, or I want to win elections in Italy, particularly if I'm a right-wing politician, professional politician in Italy, I might, because I want to win elections, I want to appeal to some Italian voters by saying, I'm going to fight those Brussels bureaucrats. those big Brussels bureaucrats trying to make us Italians forget our Italian values on the name of their objectives of creating their vision of a Europe in which Italy is going to lose its identity. Blah 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 blah. Right? This is campaign rhetoric. But the bureaucracy of the European Union in Brussels, it's small. I mean, one estimates I saw over the last several years is that it's about 40,000 people work for the European Union. 40,000 people. And of course, the European Commission is the biggest part of the European Union bureaucracy in Brussels. And it's in a building called Berlaymont, which is like, you know, what you say, White House in the United States or Blue House in Korea. It's Berlaymont in Belgium, Brussels, Belgium, where the European Commission is. So you hear people make reference to Berlaymont, right, as the building where the European Commission is located. But it's only 40,000 bureaucrats work for the European Union. That doesn't include the translators, the people that, you know, that translate everything into other languages in the European Union, like at the European Parliament. When the European Parliament's meeting, all of the comments have to be and statements have to be translated into the languages of the European Union. So that's not a lot of people. That's about the size of the city government of Paris. 40,000. That's it. The European Union relies upon the bureaucracies of the member states to actually implement the directives and regulations adopted by the European Union. They rely upon the vast government bureaucracy in Italy, or the vast government bureaucracy in France, or the vast government bureaucracy of Germany and Spain to actually do the work of implementing the directives and regulations that the European Union adopts through the ordinary legislative procedure or all the other different procedures for adopting legislation. And the European Commission tries to watch and see to make sure that the Italian civil service and the Italian government more broadly is actually doing what the European Union decided in Italy, in France, in Germany, in the way that the Bulgarians do things or the way the Greeks do things. They still have to do them. And if they don't, the European Commission can then, well, up until the pandemic, the European Commission typically what it had to do was that if they say, hey, Italy, you're not implementing Italian laws, you're not changing Italian law to conform with what the European Union decided regarding telecoms or digital industry regulation. You're not doing it, so we're going to sue you, Italy, before the Court of Justice of the European Union, the European Union Court, the European Union Court of Justice. It's called the Court of Justice of the European Union, often CJEU, and it would take months and years that the European Commission would sue the Italian government or sue the Spanish government before the Court of Justice of the European Union. And of course, that was the procedure up until about 5 years ago. 4 years ago, just 4 or 5 years ago. Now the European Commission has got lots of new powers, and particularly in dealing with the pandemic. Because, well, before the pandemic even, when they got the budget crisis in Greece starting 14 years ago, the European Commission began to get much more involved in regulating what Greece and the other countries in the European Union are doing in their government budgets. And the European Commission would have to agree to that enough changes were being made to give Greece or Spain or these other countries some loans that were promised by the European Union. And so the Commission became much more involved in actually watching and approving what these countries are doing, starting 14 years ago with the big financial crisis that really focused on Greece, but not only on Greece. It also covered Portugal, Spain, Ireland, but the big focus was on Greece because Greece had bigger problems. And then with the pandemic and the next generation policies that were adopted by using Eurobonds to sell Eurobonds to raise 850 billion euros, the European Commission got all this responsibility that it had to evaluate each and every individual country to get a piece at 850 billion euros that they were raising to deal with the pandemic. through selling European Union bonds. And so each country of the member states of the European Union had to submit a plan for their chunk of that 850 billion euros, and the European Commission had to sign off on it. If you wanted your 20 billion euros out of that 850 billion, you had to get the commission to say, okay, what's your plan? How to use the money? Yeah, well, you know, we think you have to change. Okay, you're doing okay. Okay, we agree. Okay, and then you have to come back and show the following year that you're doing what you promised to do to the commission. And why am I raising this point? This is really new. This began over the last 4 years. 3 years, really, 3.5 years. And it looks like a federal government, right? This is what the US federal government does with the states in the United States of America. It tells the states of Ohio, my home state, or the state of Mississippi, okay, you have a program to build new roads, new infrastructure for roads in your state. We, the federal government, will give you 50% or 80 or more, 60, 70, 80% of the money for building that program. And you're going those roads, and you're going to provide the state of Ohio, you're going to provide the other 20%. Now it's up to you, Ohio. You don't have to do this, but if you want the money from us, you've got to do it. And you have to follow certain regulations and procedures. Like, for example, you have to make sure that you hire enough people to build these roads that are from traditionally disadvantaged groups in America. So you have to make sure that you have businesses that are going to help build these roads, are going to get the contract tenders to build these roads. You got to make sure that a certain percentage are owned by Black people or Hispanic people. You don't have to do it, Ohio, but if you don't get the money from us, and we got the money. And so that's been standard practice in the US since the 20th century. And now you're seeing in the last 3.5 years, the European Commission doing that with the member states. And right now, we talked a lot about Bulgaria. Bulgaria is this little country of 7 million people that's really poor by European standards. They're due 5 billion euros from this next generation pandemic recovery program, part of Bulgaria's allocation of that 850 billion euros. And they can't get that 5 billion euros because they can't get a stable government in place. Right? They're going to have their 7th election in a little over 3 years next month in October in Bulgaria. The governments don't last. They last for 6 months and then they fall. And then they have a caretaker government. So the European Commission says, hey, you've got to do these things. And if you do, we'll give you 5 billion euros. So that's something that's not really covered enough in your book, but it's really important. Right? I mean, the commission, that's a lot of power for the commission. I mean, and particularly in these poor countries in Eastern Europe, 5 billion euros in Bulgaria goes a long way. They need that money, right? That's a big development in the power of the European Commission. But it really began 14 years ago when, you had to oversee to make sure that if you're going to give Greece hundreds of billions of loans in euros to deal with the financial crisis, they got to make changes. They got to make reforms. We call these conditionalities, right? And you got to make sure that they do them. And so who's going to watch to make sure they do them? Well, the commission, not just the commission, but the commission. So, so again, Eurosceptics continually charge the European with being too bureaucratic and intrusive. Again, only 40,000 people work for the Brussels bureaucracy. The size of the city government of Paris. That's it. Of course, but still, politicians being politicians, and they're peoples of France and Germany and Italy and Bulgaria, they tend to be suspicious. They tend to be nationalistic, and nationalists in general tend to be more prone to suspicion, right? They tend to be more suspect or sensitive to any perceived threats to the sovereignty of the nation, right? That's a big deal in nationalistic countries. And, Europe is dominated by nation states. And so, it's not surprising that professional politicians who want to keep their jobs and win elections, they're going to every once in a while complain about Brussels because that's going to get some people to vote for them, right? And because, you know, and of course, entire political careers have been built on that in places like Britain. We already talked about Nigel Farage, how he could never win a seat in the House of Commons in England, in Great Britain. He tried 7 times and failed, but he got into the European Parliament, and he built his entire career attacking the European Parliament as part of the United Kingdom Independence Party, UKIP, which doesn't exist anymore. And then finally in July, he wins an election in the House of Commons, his 8th attempt. But, you know, Britain is a more extreme case. But politicians, you find those politicians in Italy, you find those politicians in France, and they talk about Euroscepticism. But of course, you know, they're focused on winning elections. And so if Marine Le Pen becomes president of France in the next elections in France, she's not going to pull France out of the Eurozone because she wants to win elections. And the economic shock to France and the whole world of doing something like that would be so great, she'll never win another election again. And she knows that, and you know that, and I know that. But still, she can talk about Euroscepticism, that the European Union makes it too easy for foreigners to come to France. It makes it too easy for, so yeah, she continues to attack the European Union because it's part of her formula for her party and Jordan Bardella to win elections. But maybe it's not enough because, of course, they were met with, they fell short in July in the elections in France. Okay, but the European Union is always trying to be, you know, it's always under suspicion that it's not democratic enough. Why? Well, because typically, if you're going to have a democracy, you typically have to have a group of people who live in that country that all feel that they belong to the same country. We call that feeling a demos. That most of the people who live in Italy feel like that they're Italian, and they somehow believe that they all share a common future and a common past, that their individual fates are bound up together. And so they want people to rule them in Italy that they believe are Italians, and they somehow represent Italy and the Italian community. But what does it mean to be European? And do you really believe that, you know, Europe is more important to you than being French or being Italian or being German or being Bulgarian or being Greek? Maybe for college students, maybe for young people, maybe for college professors like me. Oh yeah, I'm European. But your typical French person, your typical Italian person, Europe is this thing that pops up in the media, but it's not. Most people don't spend their careers on a year and they don't live their lives in a European frame of mind. They live their lives as Italians, as Germans, as French. So you have it. There's always going to be this so-called democratic deficit in the European Union because people are going to be suspicious. Not everybody, but your typical citizen in Poland, your typical citizen in France is going to be more or less vulnerable to suspicion that somehow the French are being sacrificed for the well-being of the Europeans, whatever that means. So this democratic deficit is always going to be a challenge until people feel predominantly that they're European number 1 and Italian, German, French, Spanish, Bulgarian, Greek, Lithuanian number 2 or 3 or 4. So they come up with the European Citizens Initiative, which again is in the Lisbon Treaty, right? So that, okay, yeah, the European Commission has to respond to proposed legislation if you get a petition with 1 million signatures, and the Commission will take that in consideration. But the point is that the fact that the European Commission has the sole and only right to submit new proposals for laws to the European Union. Nobody else can do it. Just the Commission. Many people critical of the European Union say, ha, 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 ha. You see, the European Union is hostile to democracy. They try to control everything because they don't trust the people. Because the people, like Nigel Farage says, the people feel proudly English and proudly French and proudly Italian. No. We have to control them. So we can't it's anti-democratic. So the member states, they try to come up with new ideas like you can do things on a European level on your own, of course, and this European Citizens Initiative. But this is just, it's almost a gimmick. I mean, it doesn't really, I mean, of course, it's been adopted since, in the Lisbon Treaty, but it never makes it an important issue that I've seen covered in the media. All right, yeah. The Commission is responsible for the single market. The competitiveness or lack of it in Europe is a big issue. And so how do you deal with this challenge we've been talking about in the class about Europe's economic competitiveness and declining? Well, the response, of course, of people like Draghi and Ursula von der Leyen, and there are people that have really built their political identities and careers upon Europe, is more Europe, more integration. It's like whenever you have a problem with democracy, how do you fix a problem with a democratic constitution? More democracy, right? We need more of Europe, so we need to integrate more in Europe. And of course, that's a big topic of discussion these days. So to give you some participation credit, just to show you, let me see here, if I can show you here. Yeah, of course, this is from a couple of years ago. This is from, let me see, stop share screen to show you what I'm showing you now. And so you see this, you see share, and you can see this is the from 3 years ago, 2021, that Europe is setting up the sale of Euro bonds, right, to generate the 850 billion euros, or here it says 800, it varies, 800, 850 billion, whatever, however they're counting it. And so they are, and this under the Next Generation European Union program was adopted during the pandemic to deal with the pandemic, to raise this money in the form of loans to the European Union that's then distributed to the member states. So like this 5 billion euros that's due Bulgaria, it's from this, right? So the European Union has set up the machinery, the bureaucracy for carrying out this Euro sale. And the big discussion now is, okay, are we going to keep doing this? Because we need the money to invest in new businesses, new technologies, in new defense industrial policies, to develop the defense industry to deal with big bad Russia, which is attacking Ukraine and might attack other countries. Let's do this again. Let's do this again, right? And of course, that's all the big topic now, and it's the big focus of the Mario Draghi's call. All right, so again, stop share. And of course, there's opposition. It's always the Germans that are skeptical because the Germans are the engine of the European Union. So you can see here, Draghi's call for joint EU bonds hits wall. So Mario Draghi, the former president of the European Central Bank, the former prime minister of Italy, he's saying we got to keep doing this. We did it once with next generation Euro bonds for the COVID-19 pandemic. We got to keep doing it. We got to do it every year, because we need that money to invest in defense and industrial policy to make our economies more competitive. And of course, the Germans say, the German government is again saying, no, we don't know, they can't do it. And so that's all the discussion right now, that basically to set up this a Eurobond framework, keep doing it year after year after year. And the Germans are saying, well, now, wait a moment, because, of course, the Germans are always suspicious that they're the ones that are going to have to put up most of the money because they have the strongest economy. They're the most efficient. And they're saying, well, no, you can't really do that, not unless there's another change of the treaties. And they'll talk about this and talk about this and talk about this. And eventually, I predict that they will do it. So this 850 billion next generation European Union pandemic program recovery will start being used to fund more industrial policy investment, and the Commission will play a leading role in the central bank, and this is more Europe, more integration. And basically what they will do is they'll probably come up with a way to raise the money, like they did for the next generation pandemic. Europe doesn't want to have votes like they do in Ireland anymore. No more of that. No more of that. So they changed, each country approved the next generation Eurobond sale by each individual country deciding, passing something through their own legislature. No more referendums. No more referendums in France. No more referendums. No. And they'll probably do it again. So that's all the current discussion. So again, this is our short class. And so just to give you some participation credit, we stop share and we go to share screen. We go back to the, what happened with the, oh, we go to Chrome. Is that it? Let me see. Okay, so go here, Cyber Campus, and we go stop share, and then we stop share. We go share screen, share. Not that. Stop share. Go here, share, and here, share. We go here, vote. So please vote on this question. That currently the European Union is pretty much equal in economic capability and influence with the United States. Yes, no, please vote. And we'll have to stop there because, like I said, this is our short class, right? So please vote. And if you think that basically the European Union is becoming more and more like the United States of Europe, and like the United States of America, the United States of Europe, with the European Commission becoming more and more powerful. And again, never let a good crisis go to waste. So you got this, of course, this crisis with Russia, biggest war in Europe since World War II. We got to respond. We'll use an economic defense industrial policy to develop our own capabilities. And welcome to Cold War number 2. Cold War 2.0. Cold War 2.0, with Russia being Soviet Union 2.0. Any questions? If not, that's all. And I'll see some of you in the history class. 안녕히 계세요.